But of course, the bombshell that is the mining charter is yet to settle. It was dropped on the industry, of course, South Africa's revised mining charter, and it's got the Chamber of Mines very, very angry indeed. And that chamber is going to court in order to challenge the mining charter. The Mineral Resources Minister, Mosebenzi Zwane, of course, has said anybody who doesn't support the charter doesn't support transformation. And it is all getting very untidy and very messy indeed. This is the Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight, I'm talking to Riaan Koppeschaar, who is Finance Director of Exxaro. It's in the process of unwinding as black economic empowerment transaction action. And where will this leave it in the eyes of the country's new mining charter? How old's your BE transaction?
Our transaction was in November 2016. It was 10 years old, and after that, in terms of the contracts, the shareholders can unwind it.
Okay, so I mean, this is the idea that you did the transaction then in 2006, at the time that everybody was doing their transactions. You did it with black investors. You've come to a point now where the contracts have ended. Are they in the money or out the money?
No, they are in the money.
Which is quite unusual, isn't it, in the resources sector? I mean, you guys have done well by that measure then.
Yes, no, our transaction is definitely in the monies. So there is equity value created in the transaction for the BE shareholders.
Okay, so now they have what percentage of Exxaro then?
So currently 37.7%.
Which puts you well then in the realms of the new mining charter, the proposed mining charter. Correct. That the Chamber is challenging. Why did you go to that level? How did the deal work that got you way beyond what was at the time the requisite 25%?
Yeah, so at the time the deal was, there was a huge amount of facilitation in the deal from various stakeholders, including Anglo-America. Also a portion of the transaction was debt funded. Now after November, when the structure now dropped to 37.7%, a lot of shares were disposed of, and it was mainly used to redeem debt. So that's why they're currently sitting at 37.7%. But we are now in the process of implementing a new transaction, and the end game is for them to ultimately hold a 30% shareholding in the company.
So you have investors who have then had a financial benefit of the stake in Exxaro. That stake will then be reduced from the current levels of 37 to about 30%. And that will the same investors reinvest in a new tranche then of equity?
It's most of the existing investors will invest. There are one or two constituencies that will not invest, but most of them will reinvest. But
in terms of the charter, in terms of the requirements of the new charter, you will meet the basic requirements of that charter, in that you will have a 30% black shareholding in Exxaro.
Correct.
I mean, and that makes you unusual, does it not, in the mining sector? Probably the only mining company, sort of traditional white mining company that is.
Yeah, no, that's correct. And I think we've been, irrespective of the mining charter, the outcome of that, we've been working and announcing this transaction, for the last year or so. So we were not predominantly driven by what will finally end up in the mining charter.
Well, what drove the thinking then of your approach to the to your transaction? If it was outside of whatever happened to the mining charter, you had a particular course of action, a particular set of thoughts as you went into it. What were you thinking?
So for Exxaro, transformation is very important, and we are one of the foremost BE companies in the country. And we took a decision at that point in time that we want to remain a BE company with at least a 30% shareholding going forward.
What got the number? Where did the number come from?
Look, the number was informed by a couple of factors. On the one side, at that point in time, the mining charter was 26%. But remember, Exxaro is also a big player in the energy field, especially on renewable energies. And in that programs, the minimum BE requirements are 30%. And that was that basically informed our decision to go that way.
Well, one looks at the public reaction to the mining charter, and it's massively divisive as things stand at the moment. I know there are a lot of sensitivities around the mining charter, but it is going to court. The Chamber of Mines, on behalf of the mining industry, one of the things Roger Baxter has said is that last year the mining industry paid out something like 5.6 billion rand in dividends. The requirement of a 1% revenue tax or turnover tax, effectively effectively to the shareholders, the BE shareholders, before anybody else gets any dividends, would amount to 6 billion rand, more than was paid in total in dividends last year. Now, I mean, you're ticking various boxes. If you tick that box, do the rest of your shareholders lose out in terms of dividend flows into the future?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, it can't be based firstly on revenue. You know, if something like that is introduced, my opinion is it must look at profitability. But then, yeah, you can't do something that's to the detriment of the shareholders. You know, other solution will have to be developed on that.
There's the very real risk of capital, and capital is required for mining projects. Unfortunately, in South Africa, black shareholders have yet to develop a capital base substantive enough to support mining companies. You do require capital from other parts of the world, whether you raise it in the bond market, whether it's foreign direct investment in the mining sector. Without the security of some kind of return, what is the incentive to invest?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. You will have to have a investor-friendly environment for investors to invest. Otherwise, the sector may suffer.
I mean, your sector is accused of being anti-transformation. I mean, clearly, you as Exxaro would stand up and say, hold on a second, we are an example of, I hate the word progressive, but a progressive business in South Africa who sees the transformation imperative.
Yeah, correct. And that's why one of the reasons why we want to implement the new BE transaction. And I think for us, at the end of the day, when you look at a BE transaction, it's not about percentages that the shareholders hold, you know, whether it's 50% or 30% in the company. It's ultimately about the net value that is being created that at a later stage could be deployed in other projects.
Now, and are you seeing, I mean, when you analyze the success of the first tranche of your BE deal, you analyze the impact of that, because it is about impact to communities, to shareholders, to individuals in that space. Do you see that impact playing out? Where do you see it playing out?
No, look, there is a big impact. So apart from, you know, if you look at Exxaro, I think one of the problems is that we're not always talking about the successes in the industry or in the company. And for instance, if you look at Exxaro, the amount of investment that we put into the Waterberg over the last couple of years has been substantial. You know, we've built houses for employees. There's a lot of community development when it comes to schooling, training taking place. So I think that's one of the problems.
Do you stick your logo all over the Waterberg to say this school brought to you courtesy of the Exxaro empowerment deal? I mean, are you visible in delivering the benefits to communities?
Yes, I think that's a part of the problem. But sometimes the mining industry...
The school pops up and everybody thinks, oh, government's doing its job. Excellent, thank you very much.
I think the mining industry may be too modest, you know, in what they do sometimes.
Well, that modesty is not really paying off, is it? Because, I mean, you've got to be seen to be active citizens, and surely a little bit of the budget can go into promoting those success stories.
Yeah, no, I fully agree.
So will we be seeing that in future? Because there is a fight, whether we like it or not. There's a big fight at the moment between being seen to do the work, and some players are doing it, and some players admittedly will not be doing it. There will be pushback, and that's the fight that the Chamber is fighting at the moment. But as an individual company, surely you've got to stand up and say, we are the reasonable guys in all of this.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's the approach that Exxaro and probably some of the other mining companies will also be following in future.
I mean, this notion of once empowered, always empowered. I mean, you are fortunate in that because your deal has worked, that you've got investors who are prepared to see the next decade through with you. You don't have to worry about that. But there are many BE deals that have failed. That are underwater, where people set off with maybe the right intentions, maybe the wrong structure, or maybe just in the wrong commodity space and in the wrong business. These guys are having to redo their empowerment deals. Is that fair?
No, look, I don't think it's fair. Also, the problem with a commodity business, it's cyclical.
Yeah.
So these BE deals, if you don't time the thing correct, later on it may get into trouble, in financial difficulties. So that's the problem with doing BE deals, which is predominantly debt financed. So I think one of the success stories of the Exxaro BE transaction, there is capital coming into the transaction, the reinvestment by the BE shareholders. And that is also, you know, a testimony that they've got confidence in the company, that they're willing to reinvest their own equity into the new transaction.
How do you see this current standoff between the Chamber and the Department of Mineral Resources playing out? There's some quite realistic demands, some quite realistic requirements. 30% is not an onerous target, but there are other aspects like the 1% on revenue, which the Chamber is fighting very strongly.
Yeah, look, we will participate through the Chamber of Mines in that process. You know, there are obviously, as you say, there are quite a number of items that in the charter that are good, but then there are quite a number of items that we don't agree with, and for instance, that given the time frames, that we don't think it's practical to implement.
How many black directors on the board of Exxaro, for example?
We've got more than half.
Okay.
More than half is.
So I mean, you tick many of the boxes that are required. You show what is possible in the resources sector. Should the rest of the mining industry be embarrassed by their failure to get to the rate where you've been? Did you get lucky? Were you just better at your structure?
No, look, I think at the end of the day, it's you know, it's about moving the goalpost. Now, as I say, in Exxaro's instance, it's also about the confidence in the company. So your B shareholders went along, they didn't sell out of the structure. So it's difficult now to say you want to penalize another company for the BE shareholders having sold out of the structure. So it's a very thin balance that you have to strike when you look at these transactions.
Thanks for coming in. Riaan Koppeschaar, who is the finance director at Exxaro. Exxaro ticking many of the boxes on the new mining charter, but they ticked them before the charter was in place. That charter is in place now, but is being challenged in many respects by the Chamber of Mines. More holes to dig, some deeper than others. Next time. Bye now from the MoneyMakers. Good night.